good evening, and thank you for joining us this evening. To those who are online and those that are watching this as a taped presentation, it's my pleasure to welcome you to the Texas Medical Association's House of Delegates leadership presentation on Policymaking 101, learning how to make a difference. Now, if we go to the next slide, my name is Brad Holland, and I serve as your Speaker of the House of Delegates. And tonight I will be presenting along with John Flores, our Vice Speaker of the House of Delegates. And we will hear a little bit from our House staff at the very end of tonight's presentation. Let me, first of all, give a bit of a preamble and talk about policy here for a second. Some people get confused that, do we make laws or do we make policy? And there is a difference. But let me say that medical policy, that is deciding what medicine thinks is the best course of action on any given topic, that actually is not what's debated in the halls of our Austin state capitol. That's what happens actually within organized medicine, and I think it happens very well as in the Texas Medical Association as an example, where physician leaders come together and we are, as learned minds and those who are medical experts, decide what we think is the best policy or position for the House of Medicine to take on both political as well as public health and topical issues before our state that we all face. Once we decide what policy is, that's when our organization and others take that to our legislators and try and make that law. But without the important process of making policy first, none of the other steps would happen in frankly, a good way, and it would not be what's great for patients. It's not be what's good for physicians, and we are all better for the fact that medicine puts together its best ideas and policy compendium and advocates for that, having debated it amongst ourselves as physicians. And so tonight we are focusing on the process of making policy and how it happens within the House of Delegates. And so we've presented a presentation for you tonight. We will go through the presentation, and if you have questions, we ask that you save those for the end. There will be a time for questions at the end. We are watching the chat as well, but we'll go through a fairly, hopefully, thorough presentation, but it won't be super long. If we go to the next slide, I'll give you a little overview as to what we're going to talk about. Our program objectives tonight are to define a resolution and explain policy making, evaluate a resolution, whether it is weak or strong, discuss what items are part of TMA's scope of work, and discuss what happens to a resolution once it goes to the House of Delegates. Those watching this can receive one AMA PRA Category 1 credit, and there's a way you can claim that credit for having done so. I think we can go to the next slide. As a CME disclosure, the policies and standards of the Texas Medical Association, its accrediting council for continuing medical education, and the AMA require that speakers and planners for continuing medical education activities disclose any relevant financial relationship they may have with the commercial entities whose products or devices or services are discussed in this content, of which there are none, and we have no disclosures at this point. This content of this material does not relate to any product commercial interest, therefore there are none to disclose. Having done the official part there. Well, how do we get from idea to policy? You'll notice in this slide that we begin with, on the right, either a resolution from a single House member, that's where it says individual voting members. We get a resolution from county medical societies who put resolutions, and we get resolutions from sections. So that's one entry point into the idea to form policy. And those are then introduced into the House of Delegates. There is an alternate pathway over to the left, as you see, where our boards, our TexPAC Foundation or Alliance, a council or committee, or a section can form a report, which is then introduced into the House of Delegates and debated. So there are both recommendations, which are reports from these entities, and then resolutions which come from the various aspects shown there. Both of these appear in the Handbook of Delegates, which is published several weeks before the annual session of the House for people to review. Handbooks are also posted on the HOD website in time for members to prepare before they act as delegates and have to vote on these resolution reports at the annual session. The House of Delegates then can triage, pass, refer, debate, amend, and either establish policy, as is shown on the left side. It can refer to the Board of Trustees for implementation, where then TMA programs and activities may be affected. It can refer to the Council on Legislation to work for state legislation. And then once passed there, it can be beneficial and also part of our lobbying team to work on down at the state capitol. And then we can also take these issues to the Texas delegation to the AMA, where we have a national stage, and that may benefit federal legislation or regulations that affect the nation and not just the state. That's sort of an idea from idea to policy, an overview of what happens there. Let's look at governance in policy. Many of you may be familiar with this governance schematic of the House of Delegates and how the Board of Trustees, the Board of Counselors, the Texas delegation to the AMA, and the sections all interact with the House of Delegates. Also shown on this are our councils. I think the only thing I might point out here is that we have a new member experience council. That was formerly the Council on Membership, which has become the Council on Member Experience, as you see in sort of the bottom left. And the Committee on Medicaid, CHIP, and the Uninsured has become a standing committee in 2022, and that is listed on here, as well as the Committee on Behavioral Health has become a standing committee in 2023. But this is the governing structure of the Texas Medical Association and its subsequent entities, with the House being the pinnacle. All entities essentially report to the House, and the House of Delegates is the highest both policy and the highest empowered body of the Texas Medical Association. It's where elections and appointments of all these other entities take place. All right. So if we talk about House representation, our House is made up of elected county delegates. It's 1 delegate per 100 county medical society members, and 1 delegate for each additional 100 members or fraction thereof. So roughly, if you had 500 people in your county medical society, you would get 5 delegates. There's some calculations that go on and the timing at which we count delegates, but so it gets a little more complicated than that, but basically that's how the appropriation comes out for forming delegations to the House within different entities. Members of counties without a medical society are chartered and classified at large and also can receive delegates. Now we have some ex officio members of the House. All members of the Board of Trustees are present at the House and may vote. Past presidents and past speakers of the House are ex officio members, as are the 15 Board of Counselors. The AMA delegation, both delegates and alternates, are ex officio members. Members of the Council on Legislation are also, as are the chair of each of the councils that we saw on the previous slide. The sections, their delegates are ex officio members, and specialty societies also have delegates to the House. I think that covers that slide. Whether you're a delegate representing a county medical society, a section, or a specialty society, or you're an ex officio member, your role is really twofold. First is bringing physicians' grassroots concerns and opinions to the House. That means bringing ideas that you may want to form into a resolution into the House, and representing people who elected you as a delegate, representing their opinions as we debate within the House. And so that's an active sort of taking to the House, something that we hope delegates bring with them as they attend TexMed and the House of Delegates. Just as important, however, is a secondary portion of reporting back to fellow members the actions of the House and the information impacting the practice of medicine. So we visualize this as really a two-way street, that not only do delegates bring the ideas and concepts and frankly the will of those people who elected them, but once the House has debated and voted and ruled on particular issues, that the delegate has a responsibility to take that information back to their county medical societies, their home base, and report what happened. And that's how we hope that we have a good flow of information and keep the House connected to grassroots medicine here in Texas. And there's just a few of the representative medical societies that we, of the many, as you know, there's 254 counties. We don't have quite that many medical societies represented individually, but certainly a large number of medical societies send delegations to the Texas Medical Association. So what is a resolution? Well, a resolution is an idea where it has a title and resolves, and those portions are the key portions of the resolution. You know, Anytime you're asking for an action, and that's what resolutions usually do, either take a position or request an action, you need to ask yourself some questions before you even go too far with an idea. Does the requested action fall within TMA's scope of work? If it's something that the AMA should be dealing with or something that's federal, then you need to be aware of that it's not necessarily within the state of Texas and within the Texas Medical Association's purview. Is it a request for study or for a policy change? Sometimes you are asking our organization to study an issue so that we make the best idea. And sometimes you already think you know the best idea and you want to see us take that as policy. So that's an important distinction early on in the process of resolution writing. And remember, a resolution is a request, not a demand. The language that you use should be appropriate. It should be respectful, and it should not be demanding. It is a request. So that's the tone that you need to take when you write a resolution. And there's a lot more nuance to that, which we will cover a little bit better later. But in general, you want your resolution to be specific and not be global in terms of asking for the moon. You want it to be realistic. You cannot say that every copay should be set at $1. That's probably not going to be a realistic resolution. And it's not worth wasting people's time on something that is really not feasible. And you should rely on your colleagues and mentors to give you feedback as you write the resolution. And there's many, I've never seen anybody not be able to find someone to give them some feedback on a resolution, especially even some learned feedback on a resolution. So you need to involve people early in the process of taking your idea forward. So what happens to the best resolutions? We'll go to the next slide. The best resolutions, of course, help both patients and physicians, as is our calling here in the Texas Medical Association. But they meaningfully alter TMA policy in a way that the majority of TMA members support. They strengthen TMA. They are timely. We shouldn't be debating things that were important 4 or 5 years ago. They stick to the science and practice of medicine. And you want them to be sponsored by the largest contingent of the TMA that you can. In other words, if you have a resolution, you can say you introduce it as a delegate, but it's even better to have your county medical society support it and introduce it as on behalf of the county medical society, or even your entire delegation or your section. So try and get the largest entity that you can to introduce the resolution so it shows immediate support once it hits the House. Now, I have to take a little bit of an aside just for a second and say that we live in a time when politics is dividing our country more than it ever has. We all know it, and we all see that. And if we let it, it can divide our organization as well. And so our goal is to not let politics divide our organization. We need to come together as physicians. None of us want to see our organization fractured and splintered. We want to have a cohesive medical policy formation once we end TexMed. And so we ask that people not try and throw grenades and introduce something just purely to have debate. That's actually not healthy. We want debate that actually forms policy that we can all get behind. And so I think if people write resolutions with the idea of building consensus behind them, but also meaningfully alter TMA policy, those are really the best resolutions. So tips for writing a resolution. Well, separate out each part of each item. If you have several action items, you want to form this, you want to have a new entity, you want to state that this is the policy. Each individual action item should be a new resolve. It makes it much easier for us to debate in the House if your resolution is built that way. So it can maybe divide it into 3 different action items or 3 different resolution clauses, resolve that this should be done. Try and keep only one idea in each resolved clause. You need to state clearly the action that you want TMA to take. You can't just say that you support something. What action are you asking TMA to endorse? You should include any specific wording that you want to reference to the TMA policy compendium. And for specific wording on what's already been debated on that topic and trying to keep language consistent, you should consult the TMA policy compendium. And then we also have a handout, the TMA resolution process, which can be found at texmed.org/HOD, which is a good resource for a lot of the things we're talking about tonight. Now, there is a lot of information online through the Texas Medical Association website. First of all, there's a House of Delegates guide, and all these can be found as that address at the top, which we already talked about. But a House of Delegates guide that will show you the House of Delegates and what is being done at TexMed. We have our entire policy compendium, which is the collection of all policy that has been passed at previous by the House of Delegates and stands as the current policy of the Texas Medical Association. We have an audit trail, which allows you to look at, say, TexMed 2022 and follow what has happened with each one of the items that we passed and where it stands and where it was triaged. We have an election process, so you can see who was running in the election, who won the election, and then also a balloting procedure that talks about the ballot. And of course, this year, our first time voting from remote location, we will have virtual offsite voting in elections. On the right, some examples of what that looks like on our website so that you can search current policies, view a current policies index. You can take a look at an index of TMA ethic opinions and even those by our legal counsel. Again, the audit trail is shown down there, and then a direct link to the House of Delegates. Now, I have to say there is so much information. Even I myself find it daunting sometimes. And so if you're looking for something and can't find it, I will say that we have a great House staff, and we're going to talk with them, Marty Francisco being the head of that. She will speak a little bit at the end this evening, but don't hesitate to ask, because these can be some tough things to negotiate and to navigate, I guess I should say, to find exactly what you want. But we can almost always help someone find what they're looking for, even if it's not obvious to you at the first time. And by the time you do it a couple of times, then these really are fairly user-friendly. But I agree, at the first time, you probably need some help. You should research what's already been done on your topic before you write a resolution. The policy compendium in the next slide, in addition to being referred to a board, council, or committee, an item may also then be added to the policy compendium. And each time a vote is taken in the House, delegates have appointed the association in a certain direction and have established our association policy. While some policies call for immediate short-term action, other policies have long-term effect. And these recommendations for long-term association effect are policy. That's what's really added to the policy compendium, which is searchable at that texmed.org/policy. I think that covers that pretty well. Long-term policies are maintained for up to 10 years and then sunset and subject to review, oftentimes by a report. So let's go back a little bit to gaining support for your resolution. First of all, you should write your resolution, or at least your idea for a resolution, and bounce it off your colleagues. Certainly ask your county medical society to look at it. But hopefully, if you're new at the policy process, you have a mentor, and if you need help with mentors, we can help out with that too. But someone who knows the ropes in the House, or is been around the block in terms of TMA policy, that you can have take a look at this. Your caucus, TMA sections, certainly the chairs or members of TMA council committees and the specialty societies are all a resource for you to bounce your resolution off of. But you have to realize that every time you ask someone for their opinion, value their feedback, but they're also giving you a hint of what might be brought up on the House floor and give you a better idea of what you may need to use as you debate your resolution, the arguments you may use, the debate strategy, and the persuasive argument that you may need in order to get your resolution passed. And so bouncing the resolution off lots of folks is a good way for you to get a flavor of how this is going to go in the House, how it's going to go in the reference committee, and allows you a little practice to see what ideas may be out there so that you can better build your argument. And that's how you gain support for your resolution. Well, as we talk about the journey for a resolution, let me turn it over to our esteemed Vice Speaker, Dr. John Flores, who will do a bulk of the remaining portion of this presentation on the journey of the resolution and how it flows. So I thank you. I'll see you again at the end here in a minute, but I'll turn it over to Dr. Flores.
Thank you, Dr. Holland. That was really nice. I think the art of writing a resolution you really covered well, and also building support. So now I'm going to go over what happens after you write that resolution and the long journey it takes to become policy for the TMA. So this slide covers a lot. Let's start at the bottom. Basically, the Speaker of the House of Delegates appoints reference committees, which consist of a chair and 6 members who serve for one session. These members are selected based on interest in serving and reflect the demographics of our TMA, our specialties, and experience. The speaker refers each resolution and action report, which is a report containing recommendations, to a reference committee based on a topic. There are 4 reference committees, and you probably know them: financial and organizational affairs, medical education and health quality, science and public health, and socioeconomics. After we publish these in the TMA handbook, online testimony opens. Members are encouraged to fully utilize the online process to put forward their arguments for or against these resolutions. After online testimony closes, your reference committee members will meet in executive session to review all the submitted testimony and draft recommendations, which will be put forward in an interim report that will be available to you pretty quickly. After the opening business session of the House, the reference committee hearings are held live. Any member of the TMA is welcome to testify on the recommendations in the interim reference committee report. Staff and non-members may not testify. Your speakers encourage debate at these hearings rather than on the floor of the House. As you know, it gets kind of messy on the floor, so if you can put forth your best arguments during the live reference committee, that is going to serve you well. Also, keep in mind that all previous testimony given online does not need to be repeated. It will be available to our reference committee members. Following the live hearings, reference committees meet in executive session to finalize the recommendations to the House in their final reference committee report. These will be published online and delivered to your morning caucus meetings. That's where you can strategize a little bit more and finally get that resolution over the finish line. The House of Delegates then hears the reference committee reports. As each report is presented, delegates have an opportunity to extract any items they wish to debate. An item must be extracted to debate, and it's pretty simple. All you have to do is stand up and say, hey, I want to extract this one item. If it's not extracted, then we vote on those on a consent calendar, and all items that aren't extracted become policy. The speakers refer adopted items for implementation and refer items for study or decision of TMA components. All actions taken by the TMA in regard to these items are recorded in a TMA audit trail. Thank you for putting up with that. That was a long slide, but it's very important. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. You know, at the reference committee, make sure that if it's your resolution about to be presented, you're there to present. We're going to give you the opportunity to speak first and in a concise manner, lay out your resolution. You don't have to read the whole thing, but we want to hear the gist of your resolution in a very concise manner, and that gives more chance for everybody else to testify. Be prepared for opposition. Everybody else is going to they're going to be ready to testify for or against you, and at the same time, be prepared to compromise. As Dr. Holland said, we have a huge state, and we don't always agree, but at the same time, we can compromise. If you have written information or testimony, have that ready to give to the RefCom staff so the committee can deliberate on it. Listen to the debate and take notes for potential amendments. And remember, this is not a personal matter. You want to address the reference committee, but don't address other members, and be respectful. Next slide. There are 4 ways we dispose of an item. We either adopt it, we don't adopt it, we refer it for study or for decision. And we're going to talk a little bit about that a little bit more in a minute. Or we amend it, then adopt it. Next slide. All right, so you passed your resolution. So what happens now? We assign these adopted items to the TMA board, council, or committee. Other possible actions are they may be forwarded to the AMA through our TMA delegation, as Dr. Holland mentioned before. Some of these items will be taken to our legislators, and we will vigorously move those through the House, the Texas House. They'll be developed for education. Or the president may decide to have a task force formed to work on those issues. Further study may be needed by councils or committees, and then that information will be brought back to our House at our next meeting. Also, we'll work with regulatory bodies to make sure that we implement items that we think are important for our positions. Finally, community initiatives may be initiated. Next slide. Now, as Dr. Holland mentioned, what we bring to our House needs to be part of our work. Let me give you a few examples. Resolution 310 in 2019 created policy supporting limiting the sale of e-cigarettes and associated products to those who are 21 years of age or older. Now, this is now Texas law. Resolution 403 in 2019 created policy supporting that the criteria for prior authorizations be transparent, available for all physicians, kept to a minimum, and handled in a timely manner. TMA continues to advocate this position to legislators. The recent 2021 Texas Gold Card law gives physicians with a proven track record exemptions from the prior authorization process. Finally, Resolution 109 in 2022 tasked the TMA Council on Constitution and Bylaws with drafting language allowing TMA members to request access to their councils and committee meetings. Next slide. The audit trail. Once a resolution is adopted by the House, it is automatically added to our audit trail. The audit trail is our way of tracking each adopted item and reporting back on its status at the next meeting of the House of Delegates. Every item is referred to a TMA component as discussed previously. I love the audit trail. I remember I was talking to Dr. Rohack a long time ago, and I said, hey, what happened to that resolution? He goes, hey, John, look at this thing at the back of this huge book we had back then. Now it's all online, so it's very easy to look at. Next slide. And here's an example of the audit trail. It is very detailed, and it talks about what happens to each item, so you can always refer back to the work we've done previously. Next slide. The motion to refer. As I mentioned before, refer has two different components. One is for study and one is for action or decision. Let's talk first about what's for study. Basically, when you ask for a study, it's going to be assigned to a council or committee, depending on which is most appropriate. They're going to investigate that, they're going to talk about it in their committee, and then they're going to send that back to report. And then you'll have a chance to look at that report and decide to vote on it or not to accept it. Now, if you decide to move for action or decision, you're going to allow the TMA Board of Trustees and the Board of Counselors to decide how to move on that resolution. But you basically trust them to make the right decision, and that's why you elected them, because they are subject matter experts, and they have that ability to say, you know what, this is best for the TMA. Once the motion is referred for adoption, the original item is disposed of by the House and becomes business of the body to which it is assigned. All referred items will include a report back at the next annual meeting. So I know a lot of people like to say, hey, I want to report back. You're going to get that report back whether you ask for it or not. Next slide. Now remember, referral is not a bad thing. Resolution 314, which involved the extreme risk protection orders and gun violence, was brought. That was referred for study. The Council on Legislation and Council on Science and Public Health looked at this. Finally, as a result of this work, President Curran back then created a firearms work group. The work group evaluated TMA's firearm policy and proposed a set of additional policies for consideration. The results report was reported back and became policy, and it was very thorough. Next slide. My resolution died. Now what? Now, I think it's very important to look back and see why you didn't get support you needed. Was it not well written? Did you not get your support lined up? Were your arguments not cogent and impactful? You want to go back and refine and resubmit that idea. Just because you didn't get that resolution passed this time does not mean it won't work in the future. Next slide. Finally, do a lot of research on your topic. All those tools that are available to you should be utilized fully. Find out who opposed you and ask why. Talk to them. remember, we're not enemies in the TMA house. We're all friends. We want the best for our members and the best for our patients. So talk to them and get their point of view and see what happened. See if you can meet somewhere in the middle. Also know the basic parliamentary procedures. Know when you can bring your point up. Know when you need to be quiet and listen. Refer to the House of Delegates handbooks. And be prepared for your resolution to be referred if necessary. Remember, it is not a bad thing. Sometimes our members need more information before they make that final decision. Dr.
Very
Holland?
good. Yes, thank you, Dr. Flores. That was very good, and appreciate your expertise on getting us through that complicated but nonetheless understandable and important process of what happens to a resolution. The number of people that are required to make the House function, to participate in the House, to run the reference committees, to have the hearings of the reference committees, to assemble the online testimony, to pull off the whole process is really overwhelming. But it should be also very reassuring that we have the support staff to make what I think is really one of the premier democratic legislative and policymaking bodies in the country. To have that happen here in Texas, well, I'll tell you, I'm proud of what we have here in Texas. I'm proud of the policy that we generate, and I'm proud of the process that we use to ensure that it's very fair and gives everyone their fair hearing. And at the end of the day, that we end up with the best decisions that we could have possibly made. But that doesn't happen easily. And when we have a big room like you see before you here, the House spread out, it's a little tough to tell how many people actually make this process go. I will say one interesting thing about COVID: when we did the House remotely, the support staff was actually more concentrated. And so we had House Central, the brain trust, and everybody working on computers all in one spot. And it looked like something out of NASA or War Games. It was amazing the number of people that have to work to put on this process. But it just shows how seriously we take it. It is an extremely important process to make fair, and the people behind it really are. I think we have so many dedicated folks, physicians and staff alike, who really want to see Texas represented in the best way in terms of making policy that we can be proud of and make us leaders in the medical world, so that people follow our lead in terms of, well, what does Texas say on this issue? And we're going to do the same. And I think that's because our process is so good and fair and respected. And we aim to keep it that way. We want you to think that same thing, so that when you finally get into this process, you can understand that it takes a lot of work to make it fair and forthright and transparent. But that is our goal. So as you take a resolution to the House, let's remember a few things. Let's go to the next slide. Part of you being a delegate is for your benefit as well as for those you represent too. And so, even if you don't even have an idea for a resolution at this point, it's not problematic. Attend meetings. Go to your county medical society. Go to student chapter meetings, caucus section meetings. Go to other TMA meetings. Ideas will come to you, and people will have problems that you can say, "Hey, I know a way we can address that." And as a delegate, you can be the solution. Once you get there, attend conference events. Don't skip the fun stuff. We have a lot of interesting things going on at TexMed. I don't know if I'm empowered to say all what it is, but I'll tell you, I've seen the list, and I'm excited about it. There's going to be some interesting folks, some names you will recognize, and it's going to be a great TexMed. So make sure you come for the whole bit of it if you can. You make lasting connections, meeting new people and relationships that can help you now and the future, and it really keeps you connected. So watch your email and social media to learn about all the opportunities available to you during the House, both before the House actually convenes, as well as the House is convening at TexMed, and then thereafter. Let's go to that next slide. I like this slide because it shows the collegial portion of delegate work. And in this time when we face burnout in medicine, and it is still a pervasive problem, I think there is no better rejuvenation than to go to a medical meeting where you are amongst your colleagues. You're talking about what should make medicine better. You're talking about how to protect patients, how to advocate for patients, and you're seeing that you can actually do something. And I think that is probably 4 prescriptions for how to cure burnout right there, is to go do something and to go be with people who are trying to do something. It takes away that hopelessness. It takes away the sense that we can't do anything about our context or our future, because we can. And when you attend TexMed as a delegate and are a member of the House, you have a very real and upfront visualization of the fact that you can make a difference. We are making a difference, and there's no better cure for burnout. And I just find these as a shot in the arm for myself, that there is hope, to see young people there, and frankly interact with them. I used to consider myself a young person. Now I realize I'm way beyond that, but it is really something to be able to reconnect with folks who are just starting out in the process. So I ask you to also focus on that part of TexMed. And it's not just the policy making, but it's the process itself, which can rejuvenate you and reinvigorate your fervor for medicine, remind you why you went to medical school in the first place, and why we got into this. Sometimes we do need to be reminded of that. And there's no better way, I think, than to kind of talk medicine in this setting. It is special. So I hope you look forward to that. If you haven't attended the House before, you have something to look forward to. In summary, we want you to be familiar with the online resources for TMA, and there are many. If you ever have questions, you can ask our TMA staff at the emails that we've provided you. You can call the Knowledge Center, and the Knowledge Center number is a general clearinghouse number. You can call that with any question that you have. You can confirm with TMA's staff that the resolve clauses, that the resolution itself is within the TMA scope of work. Remember that titles and the resolves are the key portions. We spend a lot of time on the whereases, and those can help persuade a bit, but it's the titles and the resolves that are the key portion of the resolution that will live in perpetuity and be brought forward. We want you to work to obtain broad support early. That's always worth building your base and building your support. And we look forward to having you build relationships with others within TMA and within other support organizations that interact with TMA as we go. There is there's an upcoming leadership summit coming up here at the end of January, which is the major meeting between now and when TexMed kicks off in May. And if you don't know about the leadership summit coming up, I ask you to find out more about it. We have ways to do that as well. As we close out here, I will ask for any questions that you have. I think now's the time we need to open it up for questions. Marty Francisco, our head of house staff, and Melanie Fawcett, our TMA folks that are on this Zoom meeting as well, and may help out with questions. But either Melanie or Marty, if you want to triage the questions, I don't know if they're coming through chat or otherwise, but I may turn it over to you, so if you have questions.
Sure. We have one right now in our Q&A. Could you comment more on more senior people trying to work in a more positive manner with junior members, especially the medical students? They often have great ideas and just need some guidance.
Well, that's absolutely true, and I think it's an insightful question, even just the way it's asked. But we have, as house leadership, have tried to mentor the medical students much more actively, just so that they do have that mentor relationship with us and are not thrown to the wind. We've had some situations where medical students travel to the House was only funded if they wrote a resolution, and that was kind of an interesting scenario, because it caused a lot of people to write resolutions they didn't really have any hope of passing, or writing a resolution for the sake of writing a resolution. And no one should be playing with this process just so they can get reimbursement for travel. So we were trying to correct that, just so that we don't have this incentive to just throw resolutions out there. And that was an important step. We're still trying to work completely to solve that problem with the different medical schools. We don't think that their participation in the House as medical students should be contingent upon just writing a resolution. We want quality resolutions, not quantity. But I think our relationship with the medical student section here in Texas is very good at this point, giving them a mentor and mentoring them such that we can kind of guide if they do have ideas. we can help them narrow their focus and really write a good resolution. And we've seen major success for that in 2022, especially in 2023. And I'm optimistic that we will do the same thing in 2024. John, do you have any comments about that?
Yeah, I think, the medical students always have great ideas, but more than that, some of our younger members that are physicians, that it might be their first TMA, our first text med. I remember my first text med. I had no idea what to do with that huge book. I had no idea how to start. Luckily I had one of my mentors who kind of let me follow him around and figure out where to go and where to be and what to listen to and what ideas and how to put forward an idea. Just some basic orientation. And we've done an orientation video, which really can get some people's feet wet in this process. I think the parliamentary procedure is very daunting for a lot of our members. And if you look at our handbook, it kind of spells out how we run our meetings and why. The fact that we run them this way keeps our meetings organized and gives everybody a chance to put their ideas forward. So keep that in mind. That's why we do it that way. We're not trying to trip anybody up. But you have to keep the meeting organized. Otherwise, it can be a lot of mayhem. So if you want to be a mentor for one of your younger members, please do that.
Yeah, it's not just something that happens at the official House level. It happens at all levels. And so anybody that has contact with medical students, especially those that are representing their schools, their sections, we ask that you help them out and be quick to lend an ear and offer something constructive guidance if asked. But that happens at so many different levels. It's hard to even quantitate. But certainly your House leadership here tonight is willing to do the same, and we have been doing that with the leadership of the medical student section and with our medical student board of trustee member. Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Dr. Holland. Thanks, Dr. Flores. Could you maybe talk about how newer TMA members or even seasoned veteran members can get more involved and get more of their feet wet in the policymaking process at TMA?
Well, we will very shortly be asking for delegates to volunteer to be on the reference committees. I think there's no better way to really get your jump into the House and dive deep into the policymaking process and to serve on a reference committee. And we take you can self-nominate. You can nominate one of your colleagues who's a delegate in the House to serve on a reference committee. But that's probably the single best way. And we need to staff. We need to appoint all the reference committees. John Flores talked about the 4 reference committees. We need to appoint members of that, and those names are being taken right now up until February. So I think that's one way. Once we kind of get through this cycle, the president of the Texas Medical Association, incoming president, appoints members to councils and committees and other portions of TMA. And so if you wish to be appointed to a committee, there's also ways to submit your name, self-nominate or otherwise to be on a committee or council. And that's a little bit more a longer term commitment throughout the year. But that is also a great way to get involved in TMA, other than what we've already talked about, just showing up, attending meetings and attending the events. If you want more than that, then either serve on a reference committee or serve on a standing committee or council. Great ways to really see the process. And I think that's really where you start to feel your involvement. You can exercise your expertise and give your opinion and really see that you can steer things. John, you want to mention?
I think working on a reference committee, it's a lot of work. I mean, you're going to give some of your time that you might be, talking and visiting with your friends at TexMed, but you're going to get a lot out of it. I remember my first reference committee probably about 20 years ago, and you really learn what's the scope of the TMA and why some resolutions work and why some don't. And you also see how to write good policy. So if you really want to get your feet wet, you don't have to if you haven't never done it before, that's the best time. So I urge you to volunteer for that. Thank you, Brad.
All right. Now, are there other questions, Marty?
Yes, we have one from a member. Some of the residents that rotate with us are asking if they, as members, can submit resolutions as individuals, or would it be best for them to run these through the Young Physicians section or local and county medical societies?
Well, any delegate can introduce a resolution. Hopefully, we've stressed at the beginning of this presentation that it's best to introduce it as a coalition, or at least with a broader than just one delegate, and also to bounce it off others. I've heard stories of some state medical societies where they're having resolutions and they're ending up debating whether or not to sanction Putin on the basis of Ukraine and things like that. We have the House of Medicine has many problems. I'm not saying everything's rosy. We got a lot of problems to fix, and we do not need to spend our time debating Ukrainian policy. That's not what we're there for. So I think you do run the risk if a person is just introducing their own resolution that they may have thought up, that we get those kinds of things. And that's really what we're trying to avoid. This is the House of Medicine. We're trying to make medical policy that affects real patients, Texas patients. And so the only thing I would caution is if you get someone introducing a resolution, especially someone young who has not bounced it off, that we get something that's not topical or not appropriate.
I agree, Brad. I think it's important to make sure that it's something that's feasible and something that's going to make a difference for the TMA when you bring a resolution. At the same time, I think a young resident, they can always go alone, go lone wolf. It's going to be tougher that way. It's much better to go through those sections and their county medical societies, learn from your colleagues that have been part of the TMA already, because it is a daunting process. And writing the resolution, as we discussed, is very much an art. And you want it to be well written, and you want as many eyes on it as you can. So like I said, while it's possible to go lone wolf, I don't recommend it. I recommend you go through those sections.
Ultimately, this is for many physicians their first taste of politics in some ways, and the lesson of politics is that you need to build consensus. You can't go it alone, and I think that's one lesson that people do learn, even if it's a great idea. If you haven't done your build your base and done your homework and made the rounds with things, they just don't fly. So it requires some political insight, and I think quickly you learn that this being an inherently political process, because it involves lots of people making decisions about legislative and policy points that may or may not be controversial. You can't just throw something out there and see what happens if you want it to pass necessarily.
Well, that's all the questions we have so far in the chat. But maybe you could talk about some best practices for testifying at reference committees and on the House floor.
Well, probably the two key points about testimony: keep it brief and make it very specific. Don't shoot from the hip. If you're going to testify in a reference committee or you're going to speak on the floor, make it brief. Most of these things we limit to 1 or 2 minutes, and that is an extremely short period of time when you're at a microphone in front of a lot of people. So practice what you're going to say, make it clear, be very specific and to the point. Don't make it too flowery. Don't try and reiterate points that have already been made time and time again if you're not the first speaker. But stick to the point, plan ahead, practice, and watch your time. I think that's my recommendation to anyone testifying at a reference committee or before the House in general. John?
Those are great points, Brad. At the same time, if you testify anywhere, tell a story. We want to hear what's going on with your patients and why it's going to be important for your patients and for you for this policy to go forward. And it can work. You're going to get a lot better reception if people can really feel what you're talking about and resonate with your testimony.
Thank you, speakers. I'll go ahead and show the slide for CME now.
Okay.
So to claim CME, you'll want to scan this QR code on the screen right here, or you can visit cmeportal.texmed.org. And I've just put in the chat that link that you can click on. You'll want to log in with your TMA credentials, and if you've forgotten them or need to reset them, you can request a reset link at knowledge@texmed.org. You'll want to scroll down to location, select online. Year would be this year, 2024. And then you'll click filter. And then you'll scroll down to the bottom of that screen and you should see Virtual Policymaking 101 at the bottom. You'll want to click on that, enter 1 for the number of credit hours, and then record your attendance. And that should be it.
Well, with that, I hope this has been useful to those who are watching it. This is sort of the basics. As we said, it's 101. So there's certainly many nuances and much more to be learned than what was just presented here tonight. But this at least is an overview of the process of the House, how a resolution moves through the House, and how we, as the Texas Medical Association, use this process to formulate our policy. If you have individual questions, again, we are available. I don't know, I guess both knowledge@textmen.org, but we have a House email as well. We can maybe put that in the chat. There we go. And you can communicate with both Karen Kolar, who's the director of the TMA sections and programs. It's appropriate, especially for anyone that's in the sections. And then the overall manager of our House governance is Marty Francisco, who you heard from just a second ago. I have to say, the job that Marty does with Karen and with Connie Webster, it is just unbelievable, the amount of work and expertise that they have and how they make this all go. I'm grateful to what Marty and Connie and Melanie and Karen and many, many others, we can go on and on, even John Dorman and our CEO, Michael Darrozet, how much they all value the House. The fact that the House is really unique in that we, as a state medical society, have a House that is vigorous, and it is the leadership entity of our Texas Medical Association. Not every state does it this way, and there is a reason that I think the Texas Medical Association is the flagship organization of any state medical society in this country, and it's because of the leadership that we have in terms of how we use our House and the good work of all the people that I've just mentioned. So. With that, I want to thank them. I want to thank Vice Speaker Dr. John Flores for his expertise and presentation tonight. And on behalf of the Texas Medical Association House, as Speaker, let me say thank you and good night.